right now, the start of the day, the story today is something that just popped about an hour ago. Brian Estridge, who's the voice of TCU, has Frogs Today, a show similar to what we do, and they put this up just recently. TCU has hired Kendal Briles as their new offensive coordinator. Now, the balloon was floated up in the air. Obviously, there was blowback. There has been blowback. I mean, how many times Art's been tried to hire somewhere, and then they let it go out, and then he's gone, right? Kendal Briles, who's been at Florida State, Florida Atlantic, he's been at, obviously, Arkansas
and
Houston, and now Kendal Briles appears to be the offensive coordinator for Sonny Dykes in Fort Worth with TCU.
Yeah, it's a done deal, and there is, I mean, I get that if you're upset about what happened here 6 years ago in the Briles collapse and everything that happened in the controversy, but it has been 6 years. Kendal Briles has been hired by 4 other places other than TCU. You have 2 other coaches on the staff who were here at that time, one of whom is the strength coach, and if you haven't realized how much time they spend with this strength coach, take the offensive coordinator and multiply it by 2 or 3. And that, so, you know, I'm not trying to point fingers at anybody. We really don't know the details of what every person's involvement and everything was, but everybody but Art Briles has had other jobs and multiple other jobs since then. And so I think there needs to be a time where, you know, we just have to deal with it and move on. And TCU fans can be mad all they want, and they'll pretend to be mad. But if the offense is in the top 25 nationally and TCU is still putting up massive points like they did a year ago, and Chandler Morris and the quarterbacks play well and they recruit well, then they will forget about it and put it into another part of their mind.
Yeah, I mean, I said yesterday, you know, at this point he's been at like 4 other places. I mean, what's stopping TCU from hiring him? Didn't stop anybody else from doing it. It was okay at Arkansas. It was okay at FSU. It was okay at FAU. I mean, it's been okay a lot of different places all over the country. They had no issue with it. They had no issue with him. They had no issue with Randy Clements. TCU hasn't had any issue with Kendall, no issue with Kaz Kazadi, no issue with Carlton Buckles. Texas has hired guys off that old staff, even if they were GA types like a Casey Horney. Almost like 100 schools at this point have probably had some dalliance, you know, with a member of that staff, either, you know, the main part of it or the extended staff at this point. Shoot, when Baylor was getting torn apart, there was no lack of schools that were trying to come up, like it was chum in the water to go grab and grab that style and run with it. Texas hired freaking Sterling Gilbert. They were so desperate to try and get a little piece of that Art Briles tree, but not actually have it be Art Briles after that became toxic. Y'all remember that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Whatever happened to Sterling Gilbert?
The president flew to Tulsa.
Yeah.
The president of the university flew to Tulsa.
Sterling Gilbert.
On
and
a Friday afternoon.
Everybody at the time, and no disrespect to the guy, but it's like at the time he was nobody. The only reason he was anybody was because he was a guy that was from the Art Briles tree. There was no, like, he had been at Arkansas and did that. No, he was just a guy. He was a guy who happened to be coached by that system and had coached in that system. And I guess there was a thought that he was going to be the next big thing out of that system. And everybody else was too toxic, so they were like, let's get what piece we can off of it. But now that toxicity has basically died down. And I predicted this a few years ago that, you know, initially there's going to be the big push to get everybody fired and burn it all down. And then when all the dust settled and everything calmed down, eventually it would turn right back around and the focus would be back on Baylor like it had never left. And I've already seen one TCU guy who's a reporter. He's got, you know, good following, who's already, you know, defending it and saying, well, what about Baylor? And what about, you know, like, what using that card? And I get it. Like, that's not really one that they have a great defense against. But to me, it just shows you that no matter how scandalous something is, and by no means am I saying that anybody's like some little innocent party, nor am I saying that Kendal Briles is like guilty and needs to go to jail for anything, because again, he's been hired multiple times. There's been nothing in court outside of a lawyer's statement, which you can take at face value, and a lot of people chose to because they wanted it to be true, versus whether they weighed if it was just a lawyer trying to be, you know, as scandalous as possible in his wording. But yeah, I mean, it just tells me that as much as we, you know, parade around the greatness and glory of sports and all these different things, at the end of the day, it's all about winning at all costs, basically. And not saying that's necessarily the move that TCU's making, but they're certainly sending a message that all that stuff that they, as a fan base or as an institution, were complaining about a few years ago, all that's okay now. Not in terms of what happened at Baylor, but in terms of the people involved. There's not many people that were more directly involved than Kaz Kazadi and Kendal Briles. Like, you can't get much higher up the tree than that. So it is very interesting all these years removed to see that an institution that was so gung-ho on, the outrage is now basically compiling members of that very same staff they were outraged about. And I understand it's a different location, it's a different time of year, and that's not a knock against Kaz Kazadi or Kendal Briles. It's just hilarious to me in some ways. In a weird way, it's funny that here we are, fast forward, and the old Baylor staff is basically accumulating on the TCU side of the fence. It's wild, but it's also not surprising because that's college sports.
There's a statue, Amon Carter Stadium, of former TCU football coach Gary Patterson, who hated Art Briles, hated Baylor, and they weren't close. He used to tell me a couple of different times that he and Art were friends. No, they weren't. He hated Art Briles, and they had some passionate, incredible games. There was bitterness because they were both basically recruiting the same type players, and still are. But Gary Patterson's gone. I actually saw somebody respond when Brian Estridge and Frogs Today reported this, 3 or 4 days ago. Well, why don't you go ahead and just take down the statue of Gary Patterson, as if Gary Patterson still runs that campus, and you wonder if he's been blowing up any phones or whatever. There is some hypocrisy here. There's no question about it. Kendal Briles, good. Go do whatever you can do. He had never did anything negative to me. Some of the guys on staff basically just shunned us after all hell broke loose, after Briles was fired. Most of them then reached back out, at least to all of us or some of us as well. And I'm damn sure, I'll say this right now, I'm not anywhere to the point where I can sit there and ever say somebody doesn't deserve a second chance. I've needed chances. Maybe you've needed chances. Now, different reasons behind it, and everyone can kind of categorize whatever those chances are. But in this particular case, he's going to be at TCU. TCU did not buckle. Everybody else normally does. Florida State didn't have to deal with it. Arkansas didn't have to deal with it. FAU didn't have to deal with it. And neither did Houston have to deal with it.
You know what? There are two distinct differences, and they're not going to make the TCU fans who are mad about this look good. And look, TCU, as Sonny Dykes and Jeremiah Donati and the ones who made the decision, look, they know this is not Kendall's second chance. He's already been given that. That already happened. The FAU did that years ago. They don't have to give him a second chance. He's earned his way past all that coaching and nothing happening at the other places, right? But the thing that TCU is mad about, it's because they just came off the best season that you could possibly imagine for TCU, right? Other than winning that last game, but they had a season beyond their wildest dreams in the first year of Sonny Dykes. So they now have put themselves in this position where they think they could either do better than Kendal Briles, which maybe they could. I mean, obviously, they lost because they lost a guy who is more highly regarded in the current moment than Kendal Briles is in Garrett Riley, but also that they are the second chance. And this is not the university saying this. These are the angry fans. You're not his second chance. He's already passed through 4 other doors. You know, if it was airport security, he'd already be on the damn plane. All right? So you don't have to worry about that. Like, they've already done that. And you can feel bad about a guy's past or mad about it. But the bottom line is, if it was Jeff Lebby and you didn't take the time to read that he was Art Briles' son-in-law a year ago because his name is Lebby, it was Kaz Kazadi. His last name's not Briles. It's Carlton Buckles. His name's not Briles. It's because his name is Kendal Briles, and it was the Hatfields and McCoys between Gary Patterson and the Briles family for all those years, and you are bringing it up now. And you're not bringing it up, for the most part, because you feel any kind of way about what happened to the poor people that were assaulted here. You're not saying that. No. You're saying that because you're trying to make yourself feel better about whatever it is and you don't know.
Who did Auburn? And again, there's different levels of what you get yourself involved with that are bad, and some are worse and some are awful. Who did Auburn just hire as the head football coach?
Hugh Freeze.
Who did
their offensive coordinator
as their offensive coordinator?
Bobby Petrino. And look, Hugh Freeze's offensive coordinator is Philip Montgomery, who was here during all that time too. So
left right before all hell broke loose. And again, so that's it. We're going to have Steven Johnson from the Fort Worth Star Telegram at about 4:20. I read a column he wrote a day or two ago about this. And his whole point was, is it worth it? Is it worth it for the blowback? It will go away just like it does everybody else. But he wrote that saying, is this even the best person for the job, much less is it worth it to bring him into TCU with all the good feelings that they've had the last 6 or 8 months?
Yeah, I mean, y'all can react a certain way to it, but that's just where I am. Like, I'm not even worried about, like, the whole, what happened and all of that. I understand there's a backstory to it, but, like, we've already gone over this all. We've done it 5 different schools now. Like, you're not unique, like Paul's saying, TCU. Like, you're not the second chance. You're not the one. He's been around. He's been coaching at various spots all over the country since all of this occurred. So, like, that's – I already made my, my bones about, like, all of that years ago. I mean, at this point, and moved on, in the way that you can move on from that while still, remembering the lessons learned. But yeah, I mean, I think from the TCU standpoint, it's just funny to see. I've seen a few comments now of like, well, Sonny's earned our trust. Let's roll with Sonny. It's like, he's been there 1 year. Would he have earned your trust if he had gone 7-6? Maybe a little bit, but not the way he earned your trust by just winning. So again, circling back to what I just said a few minutes ago, it's not a surprise in college athletics that we're here where Kendal Briles is now coaching at TCU all these years removed from, just the hatred that boiled between those two schools in the heat of the hottest of moments, scandal-wise in the public eye. And, now he's coaching there, and Kaz has been coaching there, and, other Carlton Buckles is coaching there, and it's just – never would have predicted that, and yet probably should have, because that's college sports for you. I mean, it really is. I mean, you got to really screw up badly to not get any type of a second chance. And it just so happens that that's what happened with one party involved who shares the last name of TCU's new offensive coordinator. But, yeah, don't give me the, well, I trust Sonny. No, you trust him because he wins. That's why you trust him. And the moment that he stops winning games, that trust will start to falter. And you know what? I would bank on that because that, too, is college sports.
Yeah, and I can tell you that based on, the only thing we know, that everything else you would hear about any of this is hearsay. So if you said this guy was super involved or this guy was super involved, more than likely it's hearsay. That doesn't mean some of it is not true, but there's no evidence to support 100% that it would happen or not. Here's what we know Kendal Briles did. The rules he broke at Baylor. He had a recruiting violation because he talked to a kid outside the dead period at a track meet.
Yep.
And he was caught doing that because other coaches were there to do the same thing. So I'm not, morally equivocating that away, but that's what he got in trouble for. The only thing I will tell you what he did do at Baylor that we do know is that from the TCU game on, after the Wall Street Journal article, Kendal Briles kind of led the charge of shutting it down, like as far as the offensive coaching staff and the way that went for the rest of the year. But, that was a weird situation for that group of guys. So
the chat room has a little bit of both. Some of you are saying, why, my goodness, the guys paid it not so much time, and some aren't happy with it. I saw the tweet that was put up by Frogs today on the breaking news, and then a couple of down is, hey, don't judge too harshly. The Toads just aren't ready to have the world stop laughing at them. How's all the Briles bashing taste now? And then someone said, we still hate him. And that was one of the responses as well.
Yeah, I mean, not all TCU fans are happy with it. I've clearly seen some that don't like the move. And I think the big question that I've seen asked that I feel is the right question to ask, and I'd be asking it myself, is just why? Like, I mean, why ruin what has been goodwill by, bringing in that name and knowing how people react to that name and the history there with that particular school. But like I just said, like, what are we talking about here? The moment his offense starts scoring 50, no one will care. The moment TCU's back in, first place or winning games, no one will care. And that's the real deal. Like, I'm sorry to cut through what could be like probably another hour of conversation, but that's legit. That is what will happen. It won't matter what at all we're talking about right now if Kendal Briles just helps them win games to any fan out there. And look, I'm sure there's probably like Sally in Louisville's like, nuh-uh, no matter what, I'm not going to root. Okay, kudos to you. And to whoever joins you in that, if you want to make that stand, that's fine. But, I mean, he's been around for a few years now. Like I said yesterday, what's preventing TCU really from making the move, given that he's been around, he's been coaching at various places, and Arkansas is trying to keep him. Certain Arkansas fans don't want to lose him. Some are, tired of the flip-flopping as far as will he, won't he. But outside of that, I don't think they want to lose that exciting offense. In KJ Jefferson's final year, they were building up to that, and so now there's some people bummed about that. And I just think it's, like I said, part of sports and especially college sports is the fact that you're going to get some crossover, and this was probably inevitable. I mean, we've already seen Jeff Lebby back in the league a year ago, and look, man, if there's nothing preventing him from being it, I'm not going to be the one to, put my foot down and demand they not coach. I don't have that type of power, and I don't have that type of knowledge to even be able to make a move like that. I can read the same summaries and stuff that other people have based entire opinions on, but to me, that's a lawsuit verbiage, and to me, that's very interpretable, some of those things, and some have taken it and run it to the extreme. A comment about white girls, and some have taken it and been like, that's just a comment talking to a recruit, and it was nothing more than that. Some have blown it up to be the biggest thing of all time, and a sign of him being
it's evidence that he was involved.
Yeah, a sign of him being like basically human trafficking. You know what I mean? Like they've taken it such to an extreme. So it's a polarizing name. It's a polarizing spot because of the history there. But it's ultimately college athletics, and as long as he wins games, then we'll hear a lot less of this, with each win that stacks up.
I try to also, and this is my final take on it. We'll have Steven Johnson at 420. You know what? I can only go by what I know about how someone may have treated me or how I had interactions with others. Nobody on that staff, up until, again, about the time when Art Briles and all that went down, a lot of coaches went south. They went quiet. They didn't want to talk. I didn't blame them. They're pissed at the time. That's fine. But eventually some of them came around. I remember one time Chris Acuff contacted me, among others contacted me, because they were mad at the time. And the other thing is this. UT hired Casey Horney right off the top, like immediately. Casey Horney's a great dude. He's a part of the UT football system, but that was okay then, along with others. We are so, not only is it hypocritical, we are also so damn, we just lie to each other about, like, oh my God, look at him, and yet you yourself have to look in the mirror on whatever you might be doing in your life.
No, we don't just lie to each other. We lie to ourselves.
Okay, there you go.
Like, I mean,
other college football stories.
Some people, I'm not going to say that broadly. I don't agree with that. I don't think we all lie to ourselves or lie to each other. I think there's certain moments that people pick and choose, and this is one of them. But yeah, I don't think that just gives a free pass to everybody. Like, we all screw up, so let's all just keep screwing up. I don't agree with that. But as far as Kendal Briles specifically goes, I mean, like I said yesterday, good hire for TCU. You want to talk from a strictly football perspective, it's a good hire. I don't think it's the offense that, scares everybody to death the way that it did at one point in time, because now it's commonplace. It's commonplace, the spot that he just left, the league he just left at this point, when just a few years ago they were talking about it like it was some sort of witchcraft and not real football. And now everybody's trying to get a piece of it. So again, that too is college sports for you, and college football in particular. And that's why he's a coveted guy for Sonny Dykes to replace Garrett Riley with. And, that'll be a good fit for them. He knows Texas. He'll be able to recruit well and all those things. I know that's not the concern that anybody has, but, people can voice their concerns. But, ultimately TCU will just say, well, we vetted, and nobody knows what that really means, quite frankly. Well, we vetted and we feel good about it, and they'll, go through with the rest of the process and let people argue about it. But he's going to be on that TCU sideline. So that's what we do know. And it is bizarre. Like I said, that's really my main takeaway. Is I am not surprised in any way, shape, or form that there's been this, not reunion, but that he's made his way back to the Big 12. I'm not surprised that it's at TCU, quite frankly, because it wouldn't have surprised me any school outside of Baylor, really, because that just won't ever be possible. But yeah, it's definitely something that makes the league storylines next year a little bit more interesting.
No question. And so a couple of other